right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Wise Up. This is actually season 2, episode 1, our season opener. We figured that the Decatur Swap Meet video was a good place to do our season finale, end that thing with a bang. And we want to keep building on that somewhat success we've had and bring on a very special guest, an author, a sheriff, a guy who wrote this book right here, The Point. And that is your very own Wise County Sheriff Lane Akin. When did you get the writing bug? We see it on Facebook with while you were sleeping, and obviously very talented. But has it always been kind of part of your life, writing?
It has been to some extent. When I was in high school, Princeton High School, little country town back in the day, but it's not so much a little town. It's quite thriving right now. I go through a lot of stories there on that, but and I won't. But no, in high school, I wrote a column for the newspaper there about what's going on in high school, my junior and senior year, and I just loved it. I really enjoyed writing, and then when I became a highway patrol trooper, a narcotics agent, and ranger, there are a lot of things that you don't see on television when they're talking about these stories, but a lot of that was writing. And it was cathartic to me to sit down in my office with all the evidence and put it together as a ranger. And I would just get lost in time. I'll start writing. The next thing I know, it's been 8 hours. So I don't know it. I just enjoy it. And now that I'm getting close to retirement, I thought I really would like to work a little more. And I had that one in the works for quite some time. And I'm looking forward. I hope to make it a series. I've got some ideas on how I'm going to continue.
Okay. We would love you to make it a series too.
Yes, so, please do.
No pressure, but
yeah. So it started, and I don't know. I don't want to just run off with things here, but I can tell you a little bit. But
please do run off.
So I was telling Brendan, it's almost like this would be a lot easier than being on the witness stand. with the defense attorney, barking down your neck. So, of course, they always wanted us to keep our comments short so they could ask questions. And so if y'all don't mind me just running my head just a little bit, is that I was working undercover in the 80s. Methamphetamine was pretty much, those meth labs were pretty much new to Texas. And it was quite a fascinating way of manufacturing methamphetamine. And all of a sudden these meth labs started popping up, and I was working undercover. And when I would come home, sometimes I just make some notes that I want to hang on to if I ever decided I wanted to write a book, because a lot of that stuff was really interesting, terribly sad, because methamphetamine ruins a lot of lives in so many ways. So I enjoyed making those notes, and I thought about that. And then as I was nearing my retirement, I started putting those notes as well as some other notes together. They were just handwritten in a three ring binder. So I started putting them all together, putting them in digital format, and I enjoyed that, and really just finished it probably maybe just before Christmas or so. And finally, we end up with the real deal. And so just about 2 weeks or so ago, I actually held one of my books in my hands. And I thought, man, I can't believe it. It finally came to fruition. And I look at that and I think, well, I remember writing that. And it's just sort of a surreal situation, almost like an out-of-body experience. And so what concerned me so much at the time is I was afraid that I put it out there and I missed a mistake. Y'all probably feel that way.
Every week.
Yeah, so,
every day, every day.
Pretty much every day.
Yeah, with update and whenever there's breaking news, for sure.
Yeah, so I was pretty concerned about throwing it out there, and I'm thinking I'm going to start getting calls, I'm going to get email messages, I'm going to get stuff on Facebook saying, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. So far, it's all been positive.
That's great.
So I'm going to hold my breath.
That's great. From writer, media member to media member. Apparently, I didn't know that you were with the newspaper. Kind of what was like? Did you start with like? Did you know kind of how you were going to land the plane? Like how? Like was your writing process? Was it pretty like linear in terms, or Kind of how did you approach writing?
And I did have in my mind, I had the entire book. And so it's fiction, but it's based on true stories. So many of the stories you read in there actually happened. I changed the names, changed the locations. But I had in mind how I wanted to start it and finish. I wanted to start it basically at the end and then try to take it along the way until all the pieces come together and it dovetails to the point where you've got all of these different components that are working in the book throughout, different families, different things that they were dealing with, the difficulties. And so the overriding, RIDING, it was good against evil, really.
Mhm.
And that's all of us in law enforcement. We really get that mindset because we really just want to make a difference and overcome evil. And in so many ways, we have these small battles where we win over evil, but on occasion we get a little bit down in the mouth. So this deal is kind of interesting to me. Of course, I'm biased, but I enjoyed the contrast between good and evil and how sometimes those things kind of overlap, oddly enough. The book itself is realistic, and so there's some foul language in there, and I don't speak in that way, but I had, in order to tell the truth about what it was like to give the reader the understanding, there's some vulgarity and there's some meanness and there's some evil in there, but most of those things are things that we in law enforcement see on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So I hope it doesn't have too much of a shock value. Of course, I think about it most when I go to church. I'm thinking, what are these people going to think? I'm going to church and I'm talking like this, but it's if you're going to portray it accurately, you because it's a terribly violent and vulgar world, and I think it maybe get a little bit worse. But at any rate, I have enjoyed writing the book, and I'll go back to your question. So you got to reel me in sometime. So I had the framework in my head, how it was going to start and how it was going to finish. But as I was writing, I'm thinking, I want to put this in there.
Right.
I want to put this because, and I hope I had some tangents in there that I go off down rabbit trails because something would come to me, just kind of like what I'm talking right now.
No, you're doing great.
I started going different directions. But it was pretty much what I had in my mind, but there are a lot of twists and turns in there that may have changed over time.
Right. Well, I think something we learn as writers is, especially like if you take a creative writing class or something, they always tell you to write what you know.
Yes.
And it'd be hard to find someone with more kind of genuine perspective of law enforcement and the rise of crystal meth.
Yes.
Than yourself, just from your law enforcement career. I guess, what was it like, writing about stuff that was so personal to you?
Well, it's writing about it and talking about it. And when I pick that thing up sometime and I just want to look at a certain chapter, sometimes, it brings tears to my eyes. Some of it does, because I know how methamphetamine has ruined so many lives. And I've seen that happen time and time again. So it's a sad situation, but I don't think we're to the point where we can't make a difference. So I hope this book maybe will help, because there are a lot of folks, and I've had a lot of them come to my office with their children, teenage children, and telling me about the difficulties they're facing, and we seek out solutions for them, and that's where we do make it a difference, because I could name off probably half a dozen kids who grew up here, got involved in methamphetamine, but they turned away from it.
Mm.
And they're married. See, that's because we're so proud of these kids going through that difficult stuff, and they can turn it around. And some of these kids that I'm talking about, when their parents came in, we sought those solutions, and the parents were just so good about trying to help those kids. Those kids knew that they were loved, And I know of several of them who are married now. They have their own children, and things are just going so well. When I see them in Walmart or wherever, I just smile.
Yeah. Well, it's such a. We're gonna let you ask a question at some point, Brennan. It's such an uphill battle, right? You know, meth is such a devastating drug, and the amount of people who can get clean is very few. I guess that those are the things that help you push, right?
Yes.
Was those success stories and seeing, you know, kind of outweighing, the depressing, I guess, aspects of it.
Yes, and one of those stories basically is a common thread in that book, where a child actually does survive and does change.
Yeah.
So we will we'll keep on fighting the good fight, trying to make sure that we're doing the best we can for those who are in need, try to turn people away from it. You know, the border, obviously, I mean, it's a sham. It's wide open. So methamphetamine, back in the day, as we were talking earlier, methamphetamine, sweet and low packet, that's a gram, right at a gram. So back when I was working undercover in this book, a gram was $100, sometimes $120, but now it's $30, and it's nothing but pure methamphetamine. So it's gotten really ugly because of the fact that it's so open, and there's so much methamphetamine available in our community. And I put that all, and of course, there's a long story there, how we end up, in fact, it's in the book, how we end up with methamphetamine being manufactured in Mexico. We were pretty proud. You know, of course, it was the federal agencies who controlled phenylacetic acid, which was the primary precursor for methamphetamine. They controlled it, said, nope, no more. And then they went to the pseudoephedrine, which they could only make a few ounces at a time with that. So it wasn't a big problem. But then when they control pseudoephedrine, you know, you got to show your driver's license if you've got a cold, and they'll maybe sell you one packet. So methamphetamine was controlled until it went to Mexico, and now it's coming back because phenylacetic acid is coming from China to Mexico, and methamphetamine is coming across the river, across the border. And it's just really doing a lot of damage to our country, to our families. It's just an ugly situation. So 85%, we poll our inmates on occasion, and it's almost always right at about 85% of the people who are in our jail are there because of methamphetamine, either directly or indirectly. So, you know, directly they're in possession, they're manufacturing, they're selling. Indirectly, they're committing all of these different crimes.
Kind of want to switch gears. We talked about, your time writing, in high school. Also want to kind of go back to that time. Was that when you knew you were going to jump into a law enforcement career? I guess, how early on did you know? And do you remember the point in time? Like, was there a aha moment where you're like, this is what I'm destined to do, or did it?
No, well, I did. It was deep in my heart. It truly was, because my dad was a highway patrolman. And I saw him as I grew up in that highway patrol uniform, and his unit parked out in front of the house, and I just thought that's the neatest stuff. But the thing that got me the most were the conversations that I heard my dad and his friends, other law enforcement guys, talking. But there was the problem, in that my mom did not want me to be in law enforcement in any form or fashion for two reasons. It's dangerous, and secondarily, you don't make much money. And she knew that because she was married to that guy, and she was worried about him. She loved him, but he didn't make much money. So I tried to turn away from it. I truly did. So it was in my mind for a long time, and I've told the story before about meeting my first Texas Ranger, and when his name was Charlie Moore. When I met him, it's just like I couldn't get it out of my head. You know, sometimes things get in your head, and I'm sure it happens to y'all too. It gets in your head, you can't get that out of your head. And so I tried to deny it. My mom wanted me to be a dentist or an accountant, and I didn't want to be either one of those things. And I don't have anything against dentists, and I go to them. I use an accountant and I use a dentist. So I'm glad we've got them, but I didn't want to be one.
Yeah.
So eventually I just couldn't help it. I moved toward law enforcement. And I mean, I was really lost when I was in college. I was in college to play football, not to learn anything else. I just wanted to play football. But I got a little more serious as time went on. And I was still looking for other things that maybe I was thinking about, maybe being a coach, being a teacher. I couldn't, but I just kept coming back to law enforcement. I tried, but I couldn't turn away.
Seems like both of those have, coach or teacher. It's like you want to make a difference.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I think those are 3 interesting fields to seek out.
Yes.
For sure.
How many years did you spend in law enforcement before you were working for DPS?
Well, it was just 2 years.
Okay.
Before I joined DPS, and I was at DFW Airport when it first opened. And I started there in 74. I think it was probably about a year old at that time. I started in 74. In fact, it's November 4th, 1974. I started at DFW Airport, was there 2 years, and then went to DPS.
Can you kind of talk about, or like maybe explain for someone like me who doesn't understand, the process of kind of rising through the ranks of DPS, or maybe the different divisions? Because I don't think a lot of people understand like the whole umbrella that DPS is. So can you kind of take me from where you started and kind of how you grew through the DPS system?
So if you get accepted, they send you to an academy. It was 21 weeks back then. I started in, I think it was September 14th of 1976, and it went through January 14th of, January 21st, somewhere in there, of 1977. So it was long, and I mean, you lived there, and you were under their thumb. I mean, it was a hellacious 21 weeks or so. They wake us up in the middle of the night, tell us to go down. We'd have to make up our bed, get dressed properly, 2:00 in the morning, go down, sit in the classroom, take a spelling test, or recite the 10 general orders. So it was, it was military, military-like. And it was tough, but my dad told me, he said, when I told him I was going to the academy, he said, "You'll never make it. You're not tough enough to make it." Of course, he did that because he knew, as stubborn as I was going to, it didn't matter if they're going to throw me off the roof. I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay. There's nothing they can do about it. So you start off as a trooper. There are a lot of different categories, but I wanted to be a highway patrol trooper. Luckily, I became a highway patrol trooper, went to commerce. And after about 5 years, I started thinking about promoting. And my overall goal was to become a Texas Ranger. But I was told by a wise man, don't talk about it because there's a level of jealousy. So I didn't. And my first run was at the DPS narcotics group. And so in 83, I became a DPS narcotics. So in order to promote, you had to take a written test in your region, which would have been Garland. And then if you do well enough on the written test, they send you to Austin for the interview board. And they do the background and make sure you're not there do well and you're taking care of business. You got a work ethic. And it's the same. It was the same thing. I did 5 years working undercover for DPS narcotics, and then I had the opportunity to try to become a Texas Ranger. And it was the same thing, but it was a little more demanding. It was a little more overwhelming. So I mean, I can go so many stories into that, but I know you have another question.
What was the process of, you talked about being undercover in the narcotics division. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested in like the process of building a persona or like building a character that you have to become to do your job. I guess, how much time did you have to spend or set aside that, you took to build a real person that you had to become?
Well, and so the Department of Public Safety helped us with that, with training as well as some mentorship, almost like an FTO, field training officer, on undercover operations. So after about a three-week school, and then coming back and working with other experienced undercover agents, so you have the full identification, credit cards, driver's license, all in fictitious stuff, vehicles that have license plates you can't trace. Of course, my biggest appreciation first thing was I didn't shave. So I was all haired over, and people didn't recognize me anymore. And I thought, well, that's kind of nice, kind of incognito now. But it was that process that gets you to the point that you can get out and start working those investigations. You have to stop at the bottom. Usually, sometimes you're lucky enough you're a little bit higher, and you want to get all the way to the source, who's either manufacturing or trafficking. So cocaine, heroin, that was all coming from outside the United States, but methamphetamine was being manufactured domestically, and a lot of the marijuana was being grown. Of course, marijuana was a big deal back then, but I really I enjoyed the methamphetamine crowd a little more. The cocaine crowd was really kind of fun too.
They were just there for a good time.
So and you get tempted so many times, and they expect you to use drugs with them. And I would always make it clear when I was, and of course, I always had a pocket full of money because the state had given me money. And a lot of stories here too. But so when I was doing those deals, I would never use, and I would make it clear to them, you fools, you ought to use and you're losing your money. I am in it for the money. That's it. And I'd have a story saying that I had some employees, I had a girlfriend, I had some prostitutes working for me. So those kind of stories that I kind of laid out there, and they believe me. And I got to say that working undercover, and it's hard really to lie. For me, it's hard. In fact, one of the elders at our church, I said, I'm not comfortable because I'm lying to a lot of people. And so he pointed out some folks in the Bible who did that because they're trying to help get a few things done. So he blessed me for lying. So, and I was feeling kind of bad, which made me think it's about time for me to change, because I felt like I was getting pretty good at lying. And I don't know that that's an attribute that I would be proud of, but it was necessary to get it done. And then when obviously some other things, there are so many things that bothered me, and so many things I think about. I haven't talked about the undercover work in quite some time, except in that book. But sometimes I got to like these people I was buying drugs from. And I felt really badly when they found out that I wasn't Joe. I was really Lane Akin, the narcotics agent. So I wasn't Joe Lane anymore. I was Lane Akin.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, so that was my name.
Okay.
Joseph Lane was my undercover name. And somewhere I got the driver's license with that name on it. But there were a lot of good DPS narcs that I worked with. And I mentioned them in the last part of the book, the prologue, I guess is what it's called. Because they were a rough and tumble group of guys, and they despised methamphetamine. So did I answer your question?
You gave us.
I got a follow-up
boxes.
So I'm trying to, because like when I, just thinking about it, you're such a meticulously kept person. You're very, you're spot on with your appearance and everything. I was trying to picture. So it was a beard. Was it like, do you have a ponytail or anything?
No, but I did have hair. I probably pretty much like you look right now, but sometimes my hair was a little bit longer. So no, I was all haired over, and it was kind of funny for going to church. So when I'd come into church and I got the beard and everything going on, there was one elder there who didn't know who I was with all that stuff. And then when it was time to go to court, I'd have to shave all that stuff up and get a haircut and get ready to go testify. And then he'd know me. So it was kind of funny, just losing your identity, which I must say I kind of enjoyed having that kind of anonymity. Mm-hmm. It was unusual, especially going from there to being a ranger where everybody wants to talk to you, and nobody really wanted to talk to me when I was in art.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, kind of get close to some of these people. So was it a situation like if they're about to get arrested, like, hey, I'm actually Lane Akin and undercover?
Well, generally speaking, there were some of those times, but most of the times when it was time, we called it to bust out. When it was time to bust out, I would disappear if it was a buy bust, and that one of those buy bust stories is in there, and that happened in Austin. So I usually would step aside, and then there'd be somebody else come in and make the rest, and then I'm gone. So it'd leave them wondering, was that an undercover agent or what happened? So you maintained that little bit of secrecy about it. Is Joseph Lane still out there? Is there somebody else? So usually I wouldn't expose my true identity until maybe at trial time.
Okay. Then quite a transition from, I guess, from Joe Lane to Texas Ranger, which, just say that it like kind of has an effect on people.
Right.
Just, could you walk me through, your time as a Texas Ranger? Saw several very interesting and newsworthy things at the time from, the Waco siege and investigating that, as well as helping protect President George Bush during his campaign for a security detail. I guess kind of just in your words, how would you describe that time in your life?
It was a wonderful time. I was excited. We were in Tyler as a narcotic. I was a narcotics agent. My wife and I and two little children. We lived in Lindale and at Hideaway Lake, and we just loved every minute of it. And I promoted to become a Texas Ranger, and they sent me to Columbus, and so there's kind of a little bit of an interesting story with that, because there was an opening in Athens, which is just like 31 miles from Tyler, which is where my wife thought if I promoted, then maybe I would go to Athens. And so it was on November 13th, 1987. I was going north out of Tyler, headed toward Mineola, and a call came over our radio, the narcotics back channel radio, sort of covert channel. And it was our secretary in Tyler telling me to call Austin and talk to Maurice Cook. And I spoke with, I called Austin from a payphone there at the Kid Jones in Mineola. It was cold. I'm standing at the payphone and I dialing up Austin, and I get Maurice Cook on the phone. He was the assistant senior ranger captain at the time. And he said, "Congratulations, Lane, you're going to be a Texas Ranger." And I was really excited. And then he said, "And you're going to Columbus." And I just froze, because I could think of a Columbus in Georgia and one in Ohio, but I didn't know there was one in Texas. I had no idea. And so I asked the captain, assistant chief, I said, "Where is Columbus?" He said, "Well, it's between Houston and San Antonio. It's on the north side of I-10. Be there January 5th. You can get an apple and a road map." And so, I go off to Columbus. I had to leave my family in Lindale, where Kay was teaching. They're still going to school, so they're gonna finish the school year. So I'm down there for the first 6 months or so, all by myself, living in a little bit of a log cabin. It's really kind of nice, but I didn't have anything to do but work, and so I worked with all of the other agencies. And see, that's the thing about a Texas Ranger. Many people don't know. It is the Texas Rangers are an assisting agency. They're there to help the other law enforcement agencies. It's not necessarily that we have immediate responsibility on a murder, a robbery, aggravated assault. That's for the local agency. And then the local agency needs some help, they call the Ranger. And so I had Austin County, which is Belleville. I had Columbus, which is Colorado County, and Fayetteville, and LaGrange. So I had those three counties, and it was a great place to work, but there was a lot of meanness down there. That's when crack, cocaine, and so that was causing a lot of problems. But I worked with the first night I got called out, and it was some guys over in Austin County from Austin County SO. They came to Columbus because there was this kid who stole his mother's station wagon. A station wagon. Yes. What is a station wagon? Well, I think it even had the wood grain.
Nice.
Have to. A real hot rod.
Yeah. So this young man stole his mother's station wagon, and they thought he was in Columbus. And so I'm standing out under streetlights right on the courthouse square in Columbus, and, just got the streetlights out there. And I'm talking to these guys, and I said, well, what's this kid's name? I think he was 17, 18. He'd fired a round in the floor between his mother's feet and took the station wagon and fled. So I'm talking to these guys, and I said, what's this kid's name? And they said, well, his name's Franca. And I said, how do you spell Franca? And he said, Frnka. I said, well, no wonder the kid's pissed off. He's missing a vowel. And I looked around at all of their name tags, and they were all missing vowels. Gert, Novosad, and good guys, but they didn't think that was funny at all because there's a different culture down there that was fascinating. So there I am in Columbus working these different things, and there were a lot of things to work. Had my first double homicide there. That is quite a story. If y'all want to hear it, I don't want to take up.
Yeah, please do.
Jump right in.
So it was a tragic deal. It really was. Because a mother had fallen in lust with some guy who was very, very controlling. And she had a 5-year-old daughter. And he shot and killed both of them and dumped them in the hog pen. And so that was the first, and it just shocked me. I had no idea that I'd be seeing things like that so early on. So we went about the business of trying to locate the controlling boyfriend. It's obvious he's the one who did it, and the evidence was overwhelming. But we couldn't find him anywhere around, so we put out one of those APBs, All Points Bulletin. And lo and behold, a few days later, Gallup, New Mexico calls and says, hey, we got your guy. So we already had a warrant for him by this time. And we flew with DPS aircraft. So that's a perfect example of why the sheriffs want the Rangers to help, because we had aircraft and we had a lot of other things that sheriffs don't have. So Bubba Brzezowski, Brian Taylor, who's another Ranger, and I got in the plane with one of the DPS pilots. And we flew to Gallup, New Mexico, just the other side of the Continental Divide. And we get this guy we interview him, we get him all, lashed up, cuffed up with ankle cuffs as well as belly chains. We put him in a plane. Brian Taylor stayed, and he's taking the vehicle back to Austin to get it examined. So it's because it's a crime scene. So you're going to have to do some crime scene work on that. So he drove back with a truck on the back of the trailer. And Bubba Brzezowski, who was the sheriff, he sits up front with the pilot, and I'm in the back. There's a bulkhead there. So I'm sitting here, bulkhead, the door to the pilot's cockpit is right here. And the bad guy was sitting just right across the way, across the aisle from me. It was a small plane, maybe room for 6 in the back, and then 2, the pilot and the co-pilot. And when he stunk because he smelled of old blood, and it was just very uncomfortable. And we started over the Continental Divide, and it got really bumpy. And I'm looking backwards, and I'm doing okay, but Mountain Man, that's what he looked like, a mountain man. Smelled worse than a mountain man. So he's leans forward, and he's getting sick. And it was quite unbelievable, the snot that was coming out of his nose. I've never seen snot stream like that before.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was pretty ugly. And then he starts throwing up. And I'm watching all this, and we're going over the Continental Divide, bouncing around, and Bubba Brzezowski sitting up front where they got good air. There's no good air back there where I'm sitting. He said, Akin, everything okay back there? And I said, Bubba, it's okay, but let's get this thing on the ground as quickly as possible, because we got to clean this mess up back here. And so we landed in Lubbock, which was probably another, 30 or 45 minutes, the longest 30 minutes of my life. And we land there. Well, before we started down, Mountain Man looked at the door, and he said, I think I'll jump. And I said, I think I'll help you. because I was just sick of this guy. Plus what he had done, it's just unforgivable what he had done. But we landed and I opened the doors. I don't know if you've been, it was a maybe Cessna 300 or so. So you open part of the door and it goes up, and then you open the other part of the door and it goes down. So you got stairs that go down. And he won't get up. And I grabbed him by his ankles, his ankle chain, and I drag him out of the plane. And he just kind of bounces on those steps as he's going down, because I'm pulling him out. He didn't want to move, so I'm pulling him out. And I'm trying to maintain my sanity as well as my wellness to some extent. So I'm dragging him out, and he bumped on those steps pretty hard, I think. And so I left him on the tarmac there, and he rolled up under the plane. The plane stopped, so he's safe. He's not going to go anywhere. He can't run, can't get up. He's sick. And I'm trying to get my head right because I had a pounding headache, and I'm just surprised that I didn't too start throwing up. But I looked over at the window there at the FBO, fixed base operator, where all the private planes come in. There were about 50 people looking through the windows at what had happened. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm just glad they didn't have cameras like they do now.
Yeah.
So I would have been in a
TMZ.
world of trouble with my captain. Oh yeah, I've been all over social media.
Well, I think, since that's your time, you're looking, you probably spent some time looking back. I know for such a vast law enforcement career, are there particular cases that stick with you? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, there are. That one, the first one, I still have the images of that. She was a redheaded little girl, just perfect, beautiful child. So those images are still in my mind. Things that you can't get to go away, but you realize that because of our faith, in my humble yet most accurate opinion, she's in a better place. So I feel good about that, but those things still get emblazoned in your head. Then there was, it's hard for me to choose, but I had to put two sheriffs in their own jail. The Rockwall County Sheriff and the Tarrant County Sheriff.
Awkward.
That would have been, yeah. Very good. That's a good observation. Awkward. That's what I'll call my next book. Awkward. Yeah, that was a tough time. So I had those two cases, and then I went quail hunting with my son, and so this was in 1993. We went out to West Texas. We're on our way back, and a phone call. I got a bag phone or in the pickup that I'm driving, and it was a captain from Waco telling me what had happened at the Branch Davidian deal, and he said, "You may need to come to Waco to help us." Of course, it was ATF running the investigation and the search warrant, and it went sadly south. And ATF, we lost 4 ATF agents that day. And that was the greatest loss of law enforcement in the state of Texas at that time. But then there was that thing that happened in Dallas about 5-6 years or so ago, I think it was July 7th, that we lost, I think 5 Dallas PD guys, and maybe one guy who worked for DART was killed. So we're down there because the AUSA, the Assistant U.S. Attorney, he wants to have a neutral entity to do the investigation of the death of those 4 ATF agents. So that we were tasked with that. There were about 15 Rangers, I think you recall, and my captain said, bring enough clothes for 2 weeks, but it ended up being more like 3 months, I think, that I was there. That was, there are a lot of things about that I can really get fired up about because some of it was not handled properly. And I resent it to this day. Maybe that's for another podcast though, because I could go on for a while
Okay.
And then of course then after that, I think y'all wanted to talk about the George Bush detail.
Yeah.
So which is a much cleaner conversation than those that we've been talking about. But so that would have been in May of 1999. Got the call. Anytime I get a call from Austin, 512, it's really not going to be. And it still bothers me to this day. Whenever I look at my phone and it's 512, I said, "Oh man, should I answer this or should I not?" But they called and they were probably going to be 15 or 20 of us. Not all Rangers. Some of them were intelligence agents with DPS, as well as some troopers. So they're 15, maybe 20, who traveled. We had several groups because he was just, watching that thing was just unbelievable. And I was apolitical at the time. Listened to the news on occasion, but I really didn't pay a lot of attention to politics. But they wanted us we had a group of about 5 Rangers, a mix of Rangers, a trooper, and a couple of intel guys. So we were there to work to actually act as quasi secret service. And we went through a couple of weeks training on the deal, and then we went out and started going to all of these different states. And we would get there before George Bush got there, and we'd learn where we're going, get from point A to point B, and try to make sure we can do it without getting shot at. That kind of stuff. But it was 10 months of living out of a suitcase. And I know my wife was really getting tired of me being gone during that. But it can be overwhelming being a field ranger because of so many agencies calling, wanting you to help, and you got to go, because if you don't, they won't ask you. Mm. So I took this as maybe a time for me that I can kind of slow down a little bit, and I won't be getting called out every other night. So I wasn't getting called out every night. I was just out every night, rather than getting called out. But George W. Bush is a good man. He's just as nice a guy as I've ever been around. It was a true honor to work with him and work for him. So here's a real quick story. On the night of the primary in New Hampshire, that was a big deal. It's the first primary. And that was all about New Hampshire. Now that's not the case. I think that's changed now. I think Iowa was ahead of New Hampshire. So George W. Bush got beat by John McCain. And so I'm outside his room the next morning, going to take him to the plane, and then he's going to go to another location, South Carolina, I think. And so there was another team waiting for theirs. So that's how we just leapfrogged. So they're all ready to go in South Carolina, I believe. And so I drove him up to the plane, and there were a couple of other guys in the car. And they got out. George W. Bush starts to get out, and this is, after getting beat the first time, and I look back because he was in the right rear, and I look back, and he swung his feet out the door, and then he brought him back inside. He said he didn't call me Lane. I don't think he ever knew my name. He just said big guy. He always called me big guy. Hey, big guy. So he said, big guy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you and your team are doing for me. I mean, I was just flabbergasted. I figured this is a guy who just may have lost the race, and he will not be president after all this. And he took time to thank me for helping him. I thought, wow, this guy might be okay.
Yeah.
And so he called us all down on December 4th, 1999. He called us all down to the Capitol. No, not the Capitol, the mansion. And he asked us to bring our wives and children. And he treated us like we were somebody. And he stood up on the stairs there and talked to our wives about how much he appreciated us being away from home. And then I'll never forget him standing on that stairway, and big old tears are coming into his eyes when he's talking about us working for him. Well, what a nice guy.
Yeah. Well, for someone who was, probably wisely just try to avoid politics, which I commend everyone who does that. Yeah. You probably got to pick up some some ideas maybe for, when you did kind of enter a political sphere when you were running for sheriff? Did you catch any tactics from George or any?
That was on such a high scale that no, I can't say that I did. There are a lot of things that I admire. So there's one thing that I have adopted from him, and that's, and I would get really upset because the media, they were really taking cheap shots at him, and the things that they were saying were not correct, and it was intentional, and trying to mislead the public. They called him a cowboy and so many different things. Mm-hmm. And he never responded to it. And it bothered me. I'm thinking, why don't you fire back at these people and tell them the truth? But he wouldn't. He just had that détente, that statesmanship, And so I have tried to adopt that. And then a few years later, of course, Trump gets elected and he fires back at everybody, and he's, that's fake news. And how did that work out for him? It didn't work out too well for him, I don't think, because he just really got ugly. And I admired George W. Bush in the way that he handled that. And I try to do that. And there are a lot of people who take shots at us that are not true. And it's hard not to fire back and say, here's the real story. Sometimes I do. Usually what I do is I tell them, hey, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. Come to the office and let's talk. And just leave it at that. And probably 9 times out of 10, they don't call, they don't come by. But every now and then they do. And then every time that they do come there and we have that conversation, their attitudes change. Well, I understand now. Thank you for taking time to talk to me. So I picked that up from George W. Bush. That's really the only thing, other than my admiration of him and his wife. What a wonderful woman.
Well, thank goodness that social media wasn't around then.
Oh,
I'm sure that's where most of the that stuff comes from. Those,
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those stories or people saying stuff there.
I'm kind of interested in, was there, a mindset change when you go from, working these high profile cases as a ranger and, doing security for George W. Bush. And then, in 2016, you find yourself as the newly elected Wise County Sheriff. And like you said, maybe having meetings with citizens or, before you're flying on planes to a different state. And now maybe someone's cattle keep, getting out of the gate or something. What was did you have to have like a different approach to how you were going to be Wise County Sheriff versus Texas Ranger? And what was the process there?
Oh, yeah, it was a huge difference. And so I knew that was going to be the case. Being a Texas Ranger didn't prepare me to be a Texas Sheriff. It's a totally different world because now I've got original responsibility. This is our business, and it's not the Rangers' business. But if I want to bring them in, I can bring them in. So I'm on the other side of that bulkhead now. I'm up front, and the Rangers in the back.
Yeah.
Now, so that's kind of nice. But I had a good chief deputy, and then had another good chief deputy with Craig Johnson. Who's done a great job. So that helps a lot. And my sheriff buddies, and I've been around sheriffs ever since I was just a little kid. And I knew that it was difficult what they had to do, but they would say, Lane, if you want to be successful as a sheriff, you've got to have a good chief deputy and a good jail administrator. And we do. We do have a great jail administrator and chief deputy. So that made it a lot easier, but it's been the best job of my life. I mean, being a Texas Ranger was nice. The undercover narcotic stuff was nice. The highway patrol, I enjoyed it all. But this is best of everything because I work for the citizens. And that is an honor. Just having those one-on-one conversations with the folks here in Wise County, I've loved every minute of it. I mean, we've been through some difficult things, and I truly hate some of the things that we've had to go through. But that's why we're here. This is the job. So after listening to my chief deputies, I soon learned what it's all about to be a sheriff. They sent us to some schools too to help understand a little bit more about it. But with the good people that we have at WCSO, it was not that difficult. But I was a little bit lost for probably the first 6 months, maybe the first year. Then all of a sudden I realized, oh, that's what's going on here, and I understand why we do this. So it's been a neat opportunity. And the best part of it all is that we don't answer to anybody other than the citizens. And if someone calls and said, hey, I am so-and-so and I'm important and I've got a lot of money and I want my son out of jail, and I've had those calls, but we treat everybody the same. And when I was with DPS, I could see somebody up in the chain of command say, yes, you are going to do that. And I would do it. So now we don't. We treat everybody the same with respect and dignity. And if they're in jail, they're treated properly, but they've got to find their own way out. I'm not going to get them out. I'm not going to stop them from going in there because they committed a crime. It doesn't matter if they live under a bridge or in a gated community. Everybody gets treated the same. And you know, this is the first time in my career that I've been able to do that there's not some kind of petty politics coming at me. And the worst of it all was that Branch Davidian thing. I'm still angry about that.
That's maybe the next podcast will get some full focus on that. But I guess in your time here, first off, could you kind of describe what's the kind of Wise County Sheriff's Office enforcement landscape like? Are there anything unique about, enforcing the law here in Wise County, whether it be, 287 and kind of those pathways for where we have a lot of major drug busts, and has it changed at all in your time? Have you seen any changes?
Well, there hasn't been. I mean, the growth, you see that when I came here in 92 as a ranger, I think there's 35,000 or so. Right now, I think there are 80,000. JD would say it's 75,000. I think it's closer to 80,000. He and I argue about that all the time. I always think we have more than he thinks. So we've got good people here, but there have been a lot of changes. And for example, I got a call. You know, a couple years back when it got so cold in February, was it 2021 or 2022? No, it's 2021. Where's 2022? So. I know, but it was really cold that
I think
week
that was
or 2 weeks.
Could have been 2.
And so my phone rang, and there's a woman talking to me on the phone. She said, I am really upset at y'all. And I said, well, what's wrong? And she said, well, there's some cows out here without jackets. And I said back, man, what did you say? She said, I'm mad because y'all don't have jackets on these cows out here. And I said, man, where did you move from to Wise? Well, I came from California. And so I said, well, ma'am, we don't put jackets on cows. and so there have been so many things like that there's a different group of people here who don't really understand. And I'm not taking anything away from them, but sometimes it makes our job a little more difficult. I think we've got a lot of good citizens here in Wise County. But the changes, other than the population, I don't see that much. I see that our calls are going up. We're running about 26,000 911 calls every year. Which is quite impressive. I'm on the NCT 911, and I was listening to the board in Arlington and Cog, but there was a chief there from Forney yesterday, and I think they said they had 6,000, and so I'm thinking, well, my goodness, we got 26,000. So our group, we're very fortunate because we've got an ECC, that's what it's called, Emergency Communications Center. And we've got dispatchers who are doing a great job, telecommunicators doing a great job. We've got jailers, 52 of them. There's 16 telecommunicators, 52 jailers. And sometimes y'all should come look at that jail. Have y'all ever been?
I've been there.
Yeah.
As a tour.
Oh yeah, you came that leadership thing,
yeah.
didn't you?
Yeah.
I remember.
Promise.
You arrived late that day.
I did. I was a little late. I was putting the paper out.
But it's amazing the way they keep that thing so clean.
Right.
And take care of business back there. And then you got the enforcement personnel, 74, 75 or so of those folks. And we've got some really good kids doing a good job. And I would say that if not for that jail, our telecommunicators, and without our enforcement team, there'd be chaos here. But we've got kids taking care of business. And I just walk around in amazement. I mean, I walked through the jail this morning. I try to do it pretty often and met with all the supervisors. They have such good hearts. And you know, there's no disdain. And we take pretty good care of those folks back there.
I know that's difficult, right?
Yeah,
in a jail setting. I mean, it can be easy to not lose your humanity, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I guess how is it just hiring the right people?
It is, and I give credit to leadership back in the jail, and one person specifically, Bob Black, who is our recruiter back there. He graduated from the Air Force Academy, I think somewhere around 72 or 73. So he's probably the only guy in the office who's older than me. So he has done a wonderful job bringing in kids, and it's almost like they're a big family back there. I mean, they have the morale that you couldn't believe. And my hat's off to those people and the folks who are putting those things in place. And I'm just kind of a figurehead in that because it runs itself. The jail administrators say, hey, we got this going on, we got this going, we got this going. And it just keeps me advised about what's going on. So really my only thing is go back there and tell them how much I appreciate them. And I try to tell them that on a regular basis. And even with some of the while you're sleeping posts, I try to put that out there so that folks know what the jailers are doing.
I guess what are some of the biggest challenges that face Wise County in terms of law enforcement?
Well, I think it goes back to methamphetamine. That is a huge, huge problem. There's that, and then mental health. Unfortunately, the Wise County Jail is the largest facility that houses mental health needs here in Wise County. They don't need to be in jail. We don't have any place else to put them. And if we don't keep them in jail, they're going to hurt somebody else or they're going to hurt themselves. So those are big problems. We're doing fairly well on the retention of our employees. We do have a little bit of trouble keeping our telecommunicators because that's a tough deal. Shift work, and many of them are young parents. So it's a tough environment. But right now we're in pretty good shape.
Maybe talk about retirement a little bit here.
Yeah.
Kind of some of our wrap up questions, I guess. Yeah. What does retirement look like for you? I know you mentioned maybe some more books, hanging out with the grandkids a little bit more, but yeah, what is it? Do you have any plans, or are you just gonna sit back and relax
Is
a
your
little
wife
bit?
okay with this?
She's not. She's pretty disappointed. Because right now we're living in a barn with living quarters inside, so it's 700 square feet. We've never been closer. But every morning I get up and leave, and sometimes in the night I get called out, and I think she probably likes it when I go out the door because since she got that 700 square feet all by herself. But we're planning on building a house, and I was hoping that we would have the house built before I retired, but I don't think that's going to happen right now. Maybe, but she's not. She's good. She's supportive. We've been married for more than 51 years, so it's been a good run, and I'm so proud to be married to her. And you heard the story.
I was going to ask, can you please? So my favorite stories is how you met your wife.
Yeah, well, I actually knew her, but I didn't know that I wanted to marry her until this moment, and that was Princeton High School, and so our locker room was right there adjacent to the gym, and so some of my football buddies came out of the locker room after football practice, and we go up into the stands and we're watching a basketball game. And so Kay, number 31, in the maroon, the shiny maroon. She looked good in that shiny maroon uniform too. I must say, she'll probably kill me when she hears. I won't tell her. She doesn't know I'm doing this. So we're up there, my buddies, football buddies. We're a bunch of knuckleheads, goof offs. We're having a great time, and it was a heck of a ball game. I think we were playing Blue Ridge, Princeton and Blue Ridge, and Kay got into a fight with the girl she was guarding, who was, sure enough, probably 50 pounds heavier and a head taller. And it was a heck of a struggle, and they ended up on the floor, and I jumped up with my guys. I said, I'm going to marry that woman. and lo and behold, I did. I asked her, not then. We probably weren't, but sophomores or juniors. So I didn't actually. I called her from my college dorm when I was playing football. And I missed her so badly, and I called her. We talked about it. We'd been boyfriend, girlfriend for a long time. Right after that, after she took that girl to the floor. And that story is actually in the book, I think, right at the very, very front of it. But I called her on a payphone, and she agreed. Thank goodness. I don't know what I'd done without her. I don't know how she's put up with me with all of this stuff that we've done, because we've been all over the state, and we really enjoy Wise County.
Was it like a tackle or like more of like a wrestling takedown?
Well, it was, they were just struggling.
Yeah.
And obviously they were both angry.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of punches, and the next thing I knew, they were on the floor, and I thought, that's the best thing I've ever seen. That is my wife. I know
awesome.
It is right there.
That's so awesome. Well, I feel like you mentioned her in your book. Just as a credit, use your editor, I think.
Yeah.
So I think I feel like there's like a conspiracy theory out there that maybe she's writing while you were sleeping.
I get that a lot. So especially when I first started writing those, people come and say, "Who's writing that while you're sleeping?" I said, "Well, I am." No, really. Who's writing while you're sleeping? And I said, I do. But Kay does edit them. I'll finish it and I'll shove the computer over in front of her. And she's a teacher, retired teacher.
Yeah.
So she's got a little sense about that stuff. And so we really make a team.
Right. That's so cool. Any like fears of being like the quarterback who, like a Tom Brady situation where you hang it up and then that burning desire to get back out in the law enforcement scene, or do you think you're kind of at peace with it?
I'm at peace with stepping away from law enforcement. I really am. I walked away from it when I was 51. I had the opportunity to go to work in the corporate world and make more money, but I didn't enjoy it. And I came back, and this has been the best job. Obviously, I was enforcement captain for 2 years before I became sheriff. And I've loved the time. So that'll actually be about 11 years total with the sheriff's office. And it's been great. So I have fulfilled my dream of being a sheriff. And I think I'm ready to step aside. Every now and then things happen, and y'all probably know that story too, that at some point I just thought I need to walk away. At the time, and it was the Athena Strand case. That morning after I woke up, probably after about 3 hours of sleep or so, we had a date to take care of our grandchildren. 2 children. One was 1, and the other is 5 little girls. And I told Kay, of course, she was going to go without me. I said, no, I want to go. So it's Saturday morning after we've done all this stuff with Athena Strand. Everything's tied up in a pretty little knot. We can finish everything later on. But when I woke up that morning, in fact, she woke me up, and I said, if I could, I would walk away right now. But that's not what the voters expect. They voted me in, and I'm going to stay, and I'm not going to fail that contract with them. So if I could have, I would have earlier, but it's the right thing to do to stay in office and make sure that everything's ready to go. and then I'll step away, and I really think I'm going to be relieved to some extent. So it's been a good run, but it's inevitable. There comes a time.
Yeah, I think anybody who watched your press conference after, in that case, you just see how these things, it's hard to separate your, personal life, your emotions from these things,
It is.
And I'm sure after so long of seeing these tragedies, is that part of the reason?
It is, and that night, I think that was December 3rd, so it's probably still December 2nd. I spent a lot of time with the family because I knew that what was coming, but we couldn't verify. And so I had 2 different meetings with the family at the church there, and just sitting down with those folks at the Baptist church, and we got in a classroom and told them where we were because they need to know. At that moment, nobody else needs to know. And the media was out there clamoring and yelling at us every time we went across the parking lot. So I told them, just give me about an hour, 45 minutes or an hour, and I'll be back. And I think I'll have all the answers. And they knew it wasn't going to be good, but I couldn't confirm. So I went over to Bobo Crossing and then came back and went back in that room, Cottondale Baptist Church, and spoke with them again, told them what the situation was. And it's just something that's hard to sit through. There's just not anything you can say to make it better. You just got to tell them the truth and tell them that we're with you all the way, and we'll do everything we can to see that this is taken care of properly in the court. So I was just ready to move along.
Yeah.
That wasn't the time.
Yeah. Well, one thing, and just personally from our newsroom perspective, is couldn't have asked for a more professional, kind sheriff that was available at any random time. Sometimes I'd be texting randomly about a cow that that had gotten out and maybe got slaughtered. Black Bean, rest in peace. Or situations like that in the middle of the night. And really appreciate, kind of everything you've done. So just selfishly, just being available for us to grab comments from, which is probably difficult for a Texas Ranger.
Yeah. So as a Ranger, you don't talk to the media. You leave that to the sheriff, your police chief, the district attorney, the judges, whoever, but no, not the judges, but it's just something we didn't do. And it was kind of a change of pace for me having to have that responsibility. But I really have enjoyed the relationship with the Wise County Messenger. I really think, and I've said this before, I don't, in the media, I don't always see the truth. But I think with y'all, I always see the truth. and I admire that. I really, really do appreciate that. It means the world to me. And I always try to do things so that y'all knew first before the big media after the Metroplex. And they can just beat you down, and you guys should have preferential treatment in my mind, because y'all are looking out for the community, which is pretty much what we're doing at the sheriff's office, looking out for the community. And y'all are part of that, because it's important that the citizens know what these agencies are doing, what their elected officials are doing. They need to know. Sometimes it's not good news, but we've got to put it out there so that they understand. And that's because we've had to put a couple of ours in our own jail. And so first thing I do when I get that done, when the door's closed, I'm sending the news release to you guys. So it's what the citizens deserve, and I think that's what the Constitution is all about, freedom of the press.
Well, obviously, thank you.
I couldn't think of a better ender for this episode, but I just wanted to make a point to say I've always in our limited interactions and, but seeing you speak in public and on Facebook and everything, always made a point to give credit to other people, but a lot of credit obviously needs to be given to you, but always appreciate your humility and, the working relationship here. And, Wise County has been a better place because of you, and we're going to miss you a lot. We're going to miss working with you.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll see some while you're sleeping. Maybe you can come write a column for us. But I wanted to make a point to say how much we appreciate you.
Confirm or deny whether you're going to be able to do this column. Just kidding. Of course. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
You're listening to Wise Up, a podcast by the Wise County Messenger.
Do want to include an outro, our weekly reminder that we are, in fact, a newspaper.
Still have a print product.
Yeah. This is, probably the most value in a little while in 2024 for a paper. 44 pages.
Including youth fair results, photos, auction results, placements. It's a labor of love, but I think this year's turned out really great. So
yeah.
Kudos to ourselves.
Yeah. Good job, us. Also, our Easter story, we do this annually. So you can remember the reason for the season.
That's right.
And then just our normal, great local news coverage.
Yeah, I got some spring break photos. Got a mix of soft and hard news. So I think everyone did a good job this week. So
yeah,
subscribe. 2 cents a page.
Yeah,
if
you're doing the math at home, it's like 2.27 cents per page, which is unbeatable value.
A bargain in my book.
Yeah, I mean,
no one else is doing that.
No,
just us.
Just us. So yeah, pick up a paper, subscribe, and thank you guys for watching
the Wise Up Podcast.